The gala was in full swing. The ballroom glittered with sparkling chandeliers, and the rich scent of expensive perfumes filled the air. Elite guests, dressed in the finest clothes, laughed loudly and sipped their champagne. The room was alive with conversations about wealth, success, and power. But among them, moving quietly between the tables, was a young waitress. She carried a tray of drinks, her hands steady but her heart beating fast. She was not part of this world. She did not own a dress that sparkled like theirs, nor did she know the etiquette of mingling with the powerful. She was there to work, nothing more. The guests barely noticed her at first. They waved her over when they wanted another glass filled or when a plate needed clearing. They whispered jokes about the staff behind her back. Some laughed at her as she passed, but she learned long ago not to take their words to heart. She had grown used to being invisible, but tonight something unexpected happened. One of the hosts, a tall man with a loud voice and a sharp smile, called out to the crowd, "We need some entertainment. Let's see someone play the piano." The young waitress froze. The grand piano sat at the far end of the room, gleaming under the lights. She had played it many times before, but never in front of so many people. Her stomach tightened, and a wave of nervousness washed over her. She had always kept her music private, a secret that no one at work knew about. And now, the world of wealth and judgment was suddenly demanding her to perform. Some guests laughed when they saw her hesitate. "Let her try. She's just a waitress," one said mockingly. Another added, "Maybe she make us cry." With laughter. The words stung, but she tried to hide her fear. She had faced judgment before, but never like this. In a room where every person seemed to hold a kind of invisible power over her. Still, she knew she had a choice. She could walk away, return to her duties, and let the mocking continue. Or she could step forward, take a deep breath, and show them something no one expected. Slowly, carefully, she moved toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, as if the eyes of the entire room weighed down on her shoulders. As she reached the piano, she paused. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. The guests whispered and snickered, assuming she had no skill, that she would embarrass herself. But inside her, a quiet determination began to grow. She had spent years learning to play, not for fame, not for praise, but because music was her voice. It was the one thing that truly belonged to her. And now, even in this intimidating room, she decided she would let that voice be heard. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and allowed the first notes to flow. As she sat at the piano. The room seemed to grow even louder, but strangely it felt distant to her. The chatter of the elite guests, the clinking of glasses, and the soft laughter of the crowd all faded into the background as her focus turned inward. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure at first. She had never played in front of anyone like this. The thought of their judgment made her stomach twist, and her hands trembled slightly. Almost immediately, the guests began to notice. A few leaned forward with smirks, whispering to each other, "Do you think she can even play a simple song?" One whispered. Another laughed softly. "Maybe she hit the wrong keys and ruined the piano." Their words were sharp, cutting through the air. Designed to embarrass her, she felt a pang of fear, her confidence wavering. Every ounce of doubt she had tried to bury rushed back. She could hear the voices in her head, echoing the mockery around her. Some of the guests even started taking out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a hilarious failure. Her heart raced. A part of her wanted to run, to escape the pressure and hide behind her apron like she had so many times before in her life. But then, she remembered why she loved the piano in the first place. It had been her secret place, the one thing that was entirely hers. When life felt harsh, when people judged her for being poor or for her simple appearance, the piano had always been there, a quiet friend that never spoke unkindly. Her fingers had danced across the keys countless times in the privacy of her small room, creating melodies that made her heart feel lighter. She realized that tonight, even in front of a mocking crowd, she could still play her music, her truth. Taking a slow, steadying breath, she placed her fingers gently on the keys. The first note rang out, soft and careful, almost hesitant. She expected laughter, some rude comment, anything to make her stop. But the first note was met with silence, not mockery. The room seemed to hold its breath. She played a second note, then a third, each one growing in confidence and feeling. Still, the whispers continued. "She's not even trying," someone muttered. "This will be over quickly," another said. They leaned back in their chairs, expecting disappointment. The young waitress ignored them. She focused only on the music, allowing herself to feel it, to let it guide her hands. As the melody slowly took shape, she realized something incredible. The mocking voices in the room began to fade, replaced by a strange curiosity. People stopped talking. The laughter died out. Some guests shifted in their seats, leaning forward, trying to understand the music that was filling the room. The piano had always been a part of her life, and now it was speaking in a way words never could. She played on, letting her fingers flow naturally, following the rhythm in her heart. Each note carried a little piece of her story, her struggles, her dreams, her determination to be seen as more than just a waitress. The mocking glances still came from a few corners of the room, but they were weaker now, unsure. Her music was stronger. For a moment, she forgot about the judgment, the wealth, the power surrounding her. There was only the piano, the notes, and the story she wanted to tell. Each chord she struck was like a quiet rebellion, proving to herself first, and then to the world. The talent and courage could not be measured by status or appearance. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. They had expected an easy target, someone to laugh at and forget within minutes. But what they were witnessing was not simple, clumsy, or foolish. It was skillful, heartfelt, and real. They couldn't look away. They didn't understand yet, but slowly, they began to feel something stirring in their chests, a mix of surprise, admiration, and perhaps even shame for their earlier cruelty. As the music continued, she grew more confident. Her fingers no longer trembled. She no longer noticed the whispering or the judgmental eyes. For the first time in her life in this room, she felt seen, not for her uniform, not for her job, but for who she was inside. Her music became her shield and her voice, and in that moment, the power dynamic that had always made her feel small began to shift, quietly but surely. The first hesitant notes had passed, and now the young waitress felt something shift inside her. Her fingers moved more confidently across the keys. The melody was no longer just tentative sounds. It had started to grow, to breathe. Each note carried emotion, each chord told a story, and slowly, she began to play the piece she had practiced countless times in private. At first, the elite guests watched with polite curiosity, unsure if they should laugh or simply stay silent. Some leaned back in their chairs, arms crossed, still expecting a mistake. But as the melody flowed, a few eyebrows lifted in surprise. The music was delicate yet strong. It had depth. It was clear that she was not merely pressing keys. She was speaking with them, sharing something personal, something real. Her heart beat in rhythm with the notes, and for the first time that evening, she felt a sense of freedom. She was no longer a servant in the room. She was a storyteller, using the piano as her voice. The laughter that had haunted her before was gone, replaced by an attentive silence. Some guests shifted in their seats, leaning forward as if drawn by an invisible force. Others quietly whispered to each other, She's actually good." Her eyes focused on the keys, yet she felt the presence of the room around her. The soft clinking of glasses, the faint murmurs, even the rustling of expensive dresses faded away under the power of her music. She let herself feel every note, the highs, the lows, the pauses, the gentle crescendos. Each movement of her fingers was intentional, filled with meaning. She was no longer thinking about judgment or ridicule. She was thinking about the story she wanted to tell. A few guests, who had been the loudest critics, now stared in disbelief. Their faces softened, and some looked almost guilty for their earlier mockery. The piece was not flashy or complicated in a way that sought attention. It was honest. It was her soul expressed in melody. They had expected a poor performance, something to mock, and instead, they were witnessing something beautiful, something that demanded respect, The young waitress's confidence grew with each passing measure. Her hands glided over the keys, moving effortlessly. She had learned long ago that music was not about perfection. It was about emotion, connection, and truth. And now, in this grand ballroom filled with elite guests, she realized that the power of music could bridge worlds. It could turn judgment into awe, mockery into silence, and fear into courage. As she continued, the room seemed to transform. Conversations had stopped. Guests who had been laughing or talking amongst themselves were now still, listening intently. Even the staff paused in their work, captivated by the unexpected performance. Her music had created a moment where social status, wealth, and pretense did not matter. There was only the sound of the piano and the emotions it carried. She played a passage that was soft and tender, a reflection of her shy and humble side. The notes seemed to float in the air, delicate but full of feeling. Then, without breaking the flow, she shifted to a stronger, more confident section, letting the power of her music fill the grand room. It was as if she were telling her life story, with each chord the struggles, the quiet determination, the secret dreams, and the long hours spent practicing in solitude. Some of the guests exchanged glances, unable to hide their amazement. A few even held their breath, completely taken in by the unexpected talent before them. The young waitress did not look at them. She did not need their approval. She was in her element. Every note she played was an act of courage, a declaration that talent and heart could not be measured by wealth, appearance, or social status. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, the atmosphere in the room had completely changed. Where there had been mockery and doubt, there was now respect and admiration. The energy shifted from judgment to curiosity, from arrogance to humility. She could feel it subtly in the way people sat up straighter, the way some leaned closer to listen, and in the way a few silent nods of acknowledgement passed between the guests. The young waitress's hands moved with grace and precision. She played not to impress, but to express. Each note resonated with honesty. Her music had become a bridge, connecting her to the audience in a way words never could. The mocking laughter of before felt like a distant memory, replaced by a quiet, powerful recognition. They could no longer see her as just a waitress. They could see her talent, her dedication, and her courage. As she approached the final measures of her melody, she felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had faced their judgment, the pressure of the room, and her own fear, and she had not faltered. Her performance was no longer about herself alone. It had become a gift to everyone in the room, an unspoken message that true skill and passion could shine even in the most unlikely places. Finally, the last note lingered in the air, soft and fading, leaving a profound silence behind. The room stayed still for a moment, as if none of the guests dared to break the spell. Then, slowly, a few soft claps began, followed by more, growing steadily until the entire room was applauding. Some wiped their eyes, moved by the beauty they had just witnessed. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Humbled by the realization that they had misjudged someone they thought they knew, the young waitress sat back, breathing heavily, a small, shy smile on her face. She had done it. She had taken the courage to face her fear, to play in front of an audience that did not believe in her, and she had turned their doubt into admiration. In that moment, she understood something important: talent. Honesty and courage could not be ignored, no matter who was watching. And in the middle of that grand ballroom, filled with wealth, power, and judgment, the humble waitress had claimed her moment, not as a servant, not as someone to be mocked, but as an artist, a storyteller, and a person whose voice could be heard through the beauty of her music. The music had begun softly, but now it filled the entire room with a power that could not be ignored. Each note carried more than sound. It carried feeling, honesty, and the story of a life lived quietly, yet passionately. The young waitress played as if the piano itself were speaking for her. And in that moment she forgot everything else: the judging eyes, the mocking whispers, the fear that had tried to hold her back. The elite guests, who had once sneered at her, now sat frozen. Some leaned forward in their chairs, eyes wide with surprise. trying to take in every movement of her hands, every note that escaped the piano. They had expected failure. They had expected humor. But what they saw and heard was entirely different. It was skill, it was grace, it was something they could not have imagined from someone they had dismissed so easily. Her music moved from soft, delicate notes to stronger, more commanding chords. It was as if the piano itself had become her voice, saying everything she could not express with words. The room, which had once been filled with chatter and laughter, had fallen completely silent. Even the staff who worked at the gala paused, unsure whether to continue serving or simply watch this moment unfold. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few who had mocked her earlier felt a twinge of guilt. How had they been so quick to judge someone they barely knew? Others, who had been quietly observing, now felt a deep admiration for her courage. The young waitress, small and unassuming, was commanding the attention of a room full of people who had considered themselves untouchable. Her hands moved with a confidence that only came from years of practice, and a deep love for music. Each chord was precise, yet full of emotion. She had learned that music was not about showing off, but about connecting with oneself, with others, and with the moment. And now, the connection she had always dreamed of was real. She was not just playing notes. She was telling a story of quiet strength, of persistence, of talent hidden behind a humble exterior. A few of the guests exchanged glances. They had thought they were the judges, the ones in control of the evening. But in this moment, they were the audience. The power had shifted. The room no longer mattered. All that mattered was the music and the courage of the person behind it. Some whispered to each other, unable to hide their astonishment. She is incredible," one said softly. Another simply shook their head, unable to find words to describe what they were witnessing. The young waitress felt a calm wash over her as she played. She no longer felt small, no longer felt afraid. Her heart was full, her mind focused, and her hands moved as if they had a life of their own. She played with every ounce of her being, letting the music carry her story to every corner of the room. The laughter, the mockery, the judgment, they were all gone, replaced by awe and respect. Even the harshest critics in the room could not deny what they were seeing. They could feel the passion, the skill, and the honesty behind each note. Her performance was no longer just entertainment, it was a lesson in humility, in courage, and in the truth that talent could not be hidden forever. As the music swelled, it created a shared experience. The room, once divided by class and arrogance, was united in a rare moment of silent admiration. People leaned forward, eyes fixed on her hands, hearts quietly moved by the power of her playing. Some guests had tears in their eyes, feeling emotions they had not expected to. Experience at a gala meant to showcase wealth and status. She moved through the final part of her piece with elegance and strength. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. She could feel the energy of the room responding to her music. Where there had been mockery, there was now a profound respect. Where there had been doubt, there was now admiration. Her music had transformed the atmosphere, and even the most critical guests could not remain unaffected when the final chord rang out. It seemed to hang in the air, suspended, holding the room in a quiet moment of reverence. The silence that followed was powerful. No one dared speak. No one dared move. The young waitress, small and humble, had commanded a room of the elite with nothing but her music, her courage, and her heart. Then, slowly, the room began to react. A few soft claps started, almost shyly, unsure if it was appropriate. But soon the clapping grew louder, more confident. Some guests even stood, applauding the unexpected talent before them. They had come to mock, to judge, to laugh. Instead, they were witnessing a story of quiet brilliance and human courage. The young waitress sat back, breathing heavily, a mixture of relief and pride washing over her. She had faced their ridicule and turned it into admiration. She had played her truth, her story, and her courage had been rewarded with the respect of those who had doubted her. In that moment, she realized something important, that talent and heart were more powerful than wealth, more meaningful than status, and more lasting than judgment. Her music had done more than entertain. It had changed minds, touched hearts, and reminded everyone in the room that courage and honesty could shine brighter than arrogance and mockery. For the first time that evening, the young waitress felt truly seen, not as a worker or a servant, but as a person, as an artist, and as someone whose voice could not be ignored. The applause filled the grand ballroom, echoing off the walls and chandeliers, but the young waitress barely noticed. Her heart was still racing, not from fear anymore, but from a mix of relief, pride, and amazement. She had done what she had never imagined she could. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and doubt, and she had turned it into something beautiful. The music she had played had changed everything in the room. Even if just for a moment, some of the guests were still silent, staring at her in disbelief. They had come expecting entertainment, expecting laughter, expecting to feel superior. Instead, they had witnessed courage, talent, and honesty in its purest form. The young waitress, someone they had considered beneath them, had shown them a lesson that could not be bought or commanded. Respect was earned, and she had earned it with every note she played. A few guests approached her cautiously, unsure how to behave. Their faces were softer now, eyes wide with admiration. I didn't expect that," one of them admitted, almost whispering. "You have incredible talent." Another nodded, adding, "That was amazing. Truly amazing." The words felt strange to her ears at first, but she allowed herself a small, humble smile. She had not played for praise, yet hearing it now was comforting, like a quiet acknowledgement that her courage had mattered. Even those who had been the harshest critics earlier seemed to hesitate, unsure how to respond. They had expected to feel superior, to mock, to enjoy the spectacle of someone they thought would fail. Instead, they felt something unfamiliar: humility. They realized that they had judged her too quickly, without understanding who she truly was. And now they could not deny it. She had more skill, more grace, and more heart than they could have imagined. The young waitress returned to her duties, carrying trays of drinks once more, but everything felt different. She walked taller, her steps lighter, her head held higher. The respect in the eyes of the guests, the subtle nods, the quiet admiration, they were all hers now, not because of wealth or status, but because of the courage to be herself, to let her talent be seen. She realized that this moment would stay with her forever. Word of her talent began to spread through the room. Guests whispered to each other, repeating what they had just experienced, telling those who hadn't seen it about the unexpected brilliance of the humble waitress. Some returned to their tables, thoughtful and quiet, reflecting on how quickly they had judged someone. Others simply watched her in awe as she moved gracefully through the room, serving drinks while carrying herself with newfound confidence. The young waitress felt a quiet warmth in her chest. She had always believed in her music, in the power it had to express what words could not. But she had never realized how much courage it took to show it in front of people who doubted her, people who thought they could define her worth. Tonight she had learned something important. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Talent was not measured by applause or recognition, but by the authenticity of the heart that created it. As the gala continued, she noticed small changes in the way people treated her. Guests who had been dismissive now smiled politely. Some asked questions about her music, curious and genuinely interested. Even the staff, who had seen her grow up quietly and work tirelessly, looked at her differently now. The respect she had earned was real, lasting, and built on the simple truth that she had dared to be herself. Later, when the ballroom finally emptied and the glittering lights dimmed, she sat alone by the piano. The keys, still warm from her playing, seemed to glow softly in the dim light. She ran her fingers over them gently, smiling to herself. This piano, which had always been her secret, had become her voice in a world that often ignored her. Tonight it had spoken for her, and she had finally realized that her worth was never defined by others, but by her own courage and talent. In the quiet moments that followed, she reflected on how much had changed in just a few hours. What had begun as fear and uncertainty had turned into confidence, respect, and even inspiration. She had shown that even someone from humble beginnings, someone overlooked and underestimated, could rise above judgment and are,